All right, thank you everybody for your time and attention. It's great to be here this morning at the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike Sylvester. I'm with Americans for Prosperity. If you're unaware of Americans for Prosperity, we got QR codes on every single table here. You can scan the QR code to learn more about our organization. But in essence, what we want to be able to do is equip you all with the knowledge and skills that you all need to be effective leaders, to be effective advocates, and to be effective organizers in your surrounding communities. Most importantly, we want to be able to advance principles that allow for people to live their version of the American dream. What we're going to be delving into today is a lot of what gets people to take action, what motivates people to go from being apathetic to taking action. But before we delve into everything related to that, I want to tell you all just a little bit about my background and why this is so important to me. Because I actually immigrated to the United States from Canada. I became a proud U.S. citizen on October 25th, 2018. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And there's just something surreal about being able to walk across an aisle, shake a master of ceremonies' hand, and receive a certificate that welcomes you to this great country. And there's just so much to love about it. Whether it's the principles instilled within the Declaration of Independence, those inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Whether it's the idea of the American dream that no matter who you are or where you're from, that if you come to the United States and you're not afraid to innovate and work hard, that you can make it. Or the idea even of the last line in our national anthem. The notion that we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. And I absolutely love that line because to truly be the land of the free, it takes brave people. It takes brave people who are not afraid to speak up for what they believe in. And it takes brave people to stand up for what they believe is right. The reality is, as we look around, and we even see it from the polling perspective, you see the overwhelming majority of Americans are concerned about the direction this country is going down. Oftentimes when I talk with people and I say, what's the biggest issue facing this country today? People just go, well, where do I even start? It's crazy how many issues are facing this country today, how many problems are going on, and yet it seems like there's so many people who just can't be bothered. How many of you in this room know a family member of yours or a friend of yours where it seems like no matter what you're telling them or what you're saying to them, they just don't care? They're apathetic. They just can't be bothered by what it is that's going on. There's a crisis of apathy within this country, and it's so important for us to figure out how we can take that apathy and turn it into action. And we need to do so, we need to figure out the psychology of what drives human behavior. It's very fascinating because humans on a lot of different ways act in irrational fashions. We can act rationally, we can act irrationally. But what has always amazed me is the decisions that people make and the motivations behind a lot of those decisions. For example, and this isn't even pertaining to politics, but for example, how many people here are sports fans? How many of you maybe collect sports memorabilia or things along those lines? It's really interesting to me to see how much money people are willing to spend on a lot of this stuff. One of the best examples I can think of is with Mark McGwire. Back in the late 90s, he became the first baseball player to ever hit 70 home runs in a single season. That 70th home run ball was sold for $2 million. $2 million. In essence, it's a baseball. When you actually think about the object this person spent $2 million on, it's a baseball. You can go to your local sports store, you can buy that for $5. You can get a bucket of them for $50. But someone felt so motivated in that moment behind the story, behind the thing that had happened, that they felt that they needed to go out and spend $2 million on a baseball. And we see this type of human behavior in a variety of different facets. We see a variety of different motivations that either propel people to do a certain thing or deter people from taking action on something. Someone who does a great job of explaining why we do the things that we do, why we take the actions we take, or why we have the apathy that we do, is legendary motivational speaker Simon Sinek. And I want you all to take a listen and figure out why it is that humans act in the ways that they do.
And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the world circle. 100%. Some know how they do it. When you call it your differentiating value proposition or proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why I mean what's your purpose, what's your cause, what's your belief. Why does your organization exist? Why do you have a company? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, when we think, when we act, when we communicate, it's really outside and it's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders, the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because you understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate in person. We say what we do, we say how we're different about it, whether we expect some sort of behavior or something like that. Here's our new law firm. The best lawyers, the biggest clients, we always perform for our clients. Here's our new car. The gas mileage it has, the seats, buy our car. That's fine. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? We really buy a computer. All I did is reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
So people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that crux, that why, is what drives human behavior. Going back to the Mark McGwire example with the baseball, he felt that that moment was so important that he had to go out and buy this thing for $2 million. If you went up to him and said, hey, here's a baseball, it costs $2 million, do you want to buy it? He would say no. But the why behind it, it was such a historic moment for that individual to see their hero hit that 70th home run ball. And that's what a lot of the greatest communicators understand, is that people buy the why of things, but not necessarily the what of things. I'll give you a ton of different examples, but it makes sense from a psychological perspective. Think about it this way. I know there's probably some parents in the room. I know there's probably some grandparents in the room. I remember growing up as a kid, my parents used to say, okay, it's time for bed. And I would go, why? And they would go, because of the way that the earth revolves around the sun. And I would go, why? And they would say something else. And then I would go, why? I would just keep asking why obnoxiously. And eventually they would say, because I said so. But here's the thing. That impulse that we have as children, that never leaves us as we get older. We're not as obnoxious about it. I didn't hear anyone on the last two panels just going, why, every time someone said something, because we've learned to regulate that behavior. But that impulse never leaves us. We always want to know the why behind the things in our lives. We always want to know why we should care about something, why this affects us, why we should take action, why we should do the things that we're passionate about. I'll give you an example that really showcases the dichotomy between communicating the what and communicating the why. Martin Luther King Jr., he had that famous I have a dream speech back in the 1960s. But I want you to imagine for a second that his speech was not titled I have a dream. His speech was titled I have a plan. What would your reaction be? Mine would be, why do you have a plan? Why should I care? That's nice, good luck, have fun. It doesn't get to that inspirational aspect that drives us to take action. Furthermore, President Donald Trump, he has that famous slogan, Make America Great Again. Imagine for a second, though, his slogan was, Make me President of the United States. You would be asking why. Why should I make you President of the United States? Hillary Clinton, back in 2016, I remember her campaign slogan was, "I'm with her," and I just couldn't help but ask why. Why am I with her? We always need to be doing this, and we always need to be establishing that why first and foremost when we're communicating with our friends, when we're communicating with our family members, when we're communicating with the members of our community, because when we fail to do that, it fails to inspire in a lot of different respects. It's not to say the what's not important, but we need to start with that why when we're communicating with various individuals. What we want to leave you with for the course of this section today is a blueprint that you can use to effectively communicate that why. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. There's a lot of different aspects that you can include. But what I want you to do is think in your head of an issue that you're passionate about. There's a ton of them out there. It could be education, healthcare, immigration, taxes, whatever it is. I want you to think about that issue that you're passionate about, and I want you to think through how you can utilize this blueprint I'm about to explain and how you can communicate that to motivate people. So the big thing that is really fascinating is when we look at motivation, when we look at what motivates people. There's actually an economist. How many people here are familiar with economist Ludwig von Mises? I see a few hands. Yeah, we got some people who are aware of Ludwig von Mises. Very fascinating individual. He was extremely interested in what drove people to take action. He, in fact, devoted his entire life towards human behavior and what drove that behavior, to the point where he wrote a book called The Human Action Model. This book is well over 1,000 pages. It's a huge read, very insightful, very interesting, but we've been able to distill it down into effectively 3 steps that need to be communicated to showcase our why, to get people motivated, to get people to take action on different things. So I mentioned earlier to think through that issue, and now I want you to think through these 3 steps behind your issue. The first one is that of a sense of unease. A sense of unease. For someone to really be motivated by something, they need to feel that deep down something is not right. There's an age-old adage in Washington, D.C., that if you want to get something done or you want people to listen, you have to present it as if it's a crisis. And it makes sense. Because for people to care, they need to feel like there is something inherently wrong or there's something inherently that they need to do as a result of what's going on. That individual's sense of unease, going back to Mark McGuire, his sense of unease was that he'd never be able to relive this moment or commemorate this moment. And that was a huge inspiring aspect for him. There's a ton of different issues we can walk through that really delve into the effectiveness of communicating that sense of unease. And we'll do that in just a little bit. But you get the idea. You've got to be able to communicate in a way on a human level that showcases that deep down something is not right, that something is problematic. But here's the thing. It's one thing to establish a sense of unease. That's the first step. That's the first thing to be doing. But the second thing is we got to be able to create a vision of a better state. Think about it this way. How many people in this room get really frustrated when someone complains all the time about the problems, but then never provides any solution whatsoever? Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. And that's because we want to be able to not just feel like something's wrong, we want to be able to know how we can make it better. And we need to be able to establish that vision of a better state that can improve the way that people look at things so that we're not just complaining about something, but we're actually solution-oriented in the ways that we approach problems. So you have the sense of unease, you have the vision of a better state, and then the last thing is a path to get there. This is where people can get tripped up because sometimes these issues are so overwhelming that we feel like we have to provide about 15 different solutions and that they all need to be solved by yesterday. But the reality with a pathway to get there is it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be something that's rocket science oriented. It can be something very simple. It could be to sign up for a petition. It could be to support a piece of legislation. It could be to oppose a piece of legislation. It could be to vote for someone to a certain candidacy or an office. A great pathway to get there is often simple, easy to follow, and is something that people can latch onto. It doesn't have to be super complex in any way, shape, or form. So I'll walk through an example of an issue that I'm extremely passionate about, and is one that's facing this country in a big way and is creating all kinds of contentious discussion. And that's the issue of immigration. We look at the crisis that's going on at the southern border, and for a lot of us in this room, it creates a sense of unease. Why does it create a sense of unease? It's because we don't know who a lot of the people are who are coming into this country. We worry that there's potential terrorist threats. We worry that it emboldens human trafficking. It emboldens cartels. It attacks humanity. It gets at our humanity in a lot of different ways. And that's why we feel this sense of unease over that of immigration. That's why I'm extremely worried about what goes on at the southern border. You think about all of the dangers that happen and all the dangers that face this country. So you have that sense of unease. But we have a vision of a better state. And that vision is to secure the southern border, make sure that we have security there to remove a lot of the bad faith actors, that we have the security there that deters people who want to cause harm from this country from entering. But we also have that vision to make sure that legal pathway is better for those individuals who are trying to come to the country legally. There's a lot of great individuals worldwide who want to come here to live the American dream, and we want to be able to make sure that we have those legal channels available to those individuals who want to come here, create value, and make this country the greatest it can possibly be. And then a pathway to get there is to think through legislation that you see, and if you like it, support it. Voice your support to your congressional members. Voice your support to your local representatives. And if you don't like it, then voice your opposition. And there's a ton of legislation out there, some of it good, some of it not so good. And it's up to us to be able to weed through that and determine it. You might even be asking, what does the human action model communication look like when it comes to the why component? And what does it look like in real life? Who are some real life examples of individuals who effectively communicate the why through the human action model? And I'm going to walk you all through just a few examples here that we can examine to showcase what separates the good communicators from the great communicators. The first example I want to bring up is for anyone who's been following Canadian politics at all. You have Pierre Poilievre. He's currently challenging Justin Trudeau. The election projections in Canada right now, I believe it's a website called 338, has it around a 90% plus chance that Pierre is going to be able to beat Justin Trudeau in the upcoming election. And a big reason for it is because of his skilled communication. So what I want you all to listen to here is how he relates to voters on a human level. I want you to try and identify, most importantly, his sense of unease and his vision of a better state. The pathway to get there is to vote him into office, and that's what a lot of politicians do. But I want you to pay attention to his sense of unease and his vision of a better state.
Do you know that this is the last major rally of my leadership campaign? We have had 80 of these rallies with a total of 93,000 people who have RSVP'd right across the country. Isn't that incredible? 10 provinces. Over 6 months. Over 6 months. I've been on the road from coast to coast to coast to coast, all 10 provinces, in countless hamlets, villages, and towns. It's been an emotional experience for me. A long distance from my family, meeting a lot of you. And I want to speak to all the people who've come to my rallies. You know, I have a policy. Every rally, I have a lineup. And I invite every single person who comes to shake my hand. Sometimes we've stayed till 1 in the morning, so that not a single person leaves without having a chance to have their say. And you've told me your stories. Some of them have been hilarious. Some have been long. Some of them have been painful and told behind a shower of tears. I have met a woman who lost her 2 children to opioid overdoses. Can you imagine losing 2 sons, her only 2 sons? I've met elderly widows who can no longer pay their bills and wonder how they will ever be able to live out their days. I have met that immigrant who came here for a better life and is banned from working in his job. I have met a miner in Timmins who could not afford the $2.50 a liter diesel to drive all the way over to Thunder Bay to see his dying parents one last time. I have met the energy worker in St. John's, Newfoundland, who tapes up his boots because he cannot afford new ones. I have met countless young people stuck in 400 square foot apartments. Even though they did everything that we asked them to do, they earned their degree, they worked hard, and they gave their best. And I have seen again and again that as people speak up, the government cracks down, leaving people feeling bullied and powerless in their own country, which they no longer recognize. I have seen not anger, but I have seen pain. There are people in this country who are just hanging on by a thread. But you know what else I have seen? I have seen hope. I have seen hope from people who believe there's a chance to take our country back and put themselves back in charge of their lives. Hope that there's nothing wrong with this country that cannot be fixed by what is right with this country. Hope that this democracy of ours belongs to every single one of us, that we can transform this again from an aristocracy back to a meritocracy. You know, when I was a kid, I was adopted from a 16-year-old unwed mother whose mother herself had just died. And my two parents were school teachers who adopted me and taught me that it didn't matter where I came from. It mattered where I was going. It didn't matter who I knew. It mattered what I could do. That's the Canada we're bringing back. And so, while it has hurt me to be away from my children throughout this race, it is for their future and for the future of your children and your grandchildren that we can rekindle that hope, that we can bring back the Canada that gives everybody the opportunity to get ahead through their own hard work, that, in the words of the great Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker, I am a Canadian, a free Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, free to worship God in my own way, free to choose those who shall govern my country. It is this heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and for all of mankind. Thank you very much.
It's pretty inspiring stuff. But what he does that's very effective, and you can see why the polling's indicating that he's got a 90% chance of winning his next election. Because he makes it human. He makes it about the people in his country. When he talks about that sense of unease, he's talking about people who are just hanging on by a thread. He's talking about the pain that people are experiencing in Canada. There's a lot of issues plaguing that country right now, and one of them being real estate prices. It's insane how much housing costs have gone up there, to the point where if you want to buy a home in Toronto proper right now, the costs are about $1.2 million just for a single family home. It's gotten pretty crazy, and he does a phenomenal job of articulating the pain that people are feeling on a human level, to showcase that sense of unease, that there is something inherently wrong with the direction that country is going down. But what he does as well is he establishes that vision of a better state. He talks about how there's nothing wrong with that country that can't be fixed by what is right with that country. He talks about the hope that can be rekindled, the ability to put people in charge of their lives. All of these different things that not just articulate the problems going on in a very human, relatable way, but that vision of a better state that helps us feel hopeful and optimistic for the ways that we can take action and the things that we can do. And that pathway to get there is he wants you to vote him in for office. But he also has a lot of different policies related to those different things that he talks about in his rhetoric. It's so important for us as communicators to figure out how we can articulate those issues we're passionate about on the most human level possible. We know that there's a lot of facts, statistics, evidence, and data out there, all of which is extremely important. But oftentimes that data and that evidence tells a story, and we need to be able to articulate that story that the data is telling us. Another example I want to bring up as well with the human action model, again, I want to think through this from just a communication perspective, establishing those three steps: the sense of unease, the vision of a better state, and the pathway to get there. And another example that utilizes this three-step process was from George W. Bush. It was around that really unfortunate time. It was around 9/11. And at the time, the country was in pain. The country was in need of a leader. It was in need of healing. And this is when George W. Bush delivered that speech around that time. You can set aside the politics, whether you agree with what he did or what he said, but I want you to pay attention to this speech in particular. I want you to try and identify the sense of unease he determines. I want you to try and identify the vision of a better state that he puts in mind. And then I want you to identify that pathway to get there as a result of those steps.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened.
So you can see the way he lays out this format of communication. It was an extremely tragic event, and it's one that, for those who are around, we remember where we were during that time. And it was his job at that time to try and bring the country together, to try and establish that sense of unease, to showcase, hey, this is a country that is under attack. But he establishes as well that vision of a better state, that we're not a nation that will back down, that we're a nation that will be able to overcome this. He had a ton of different pieces of rhetoric that contrasted the sense of unease with the vision of a better state. And then he laid out those next steps in the pathway to get there. All of the greatest communicators, when you think about it, regardless of who it is, whether it's Pierre Poilievre, George W. Bush, Donald J. Trump, whoever it is, in many ways, more than they even realize, they utilize the sense of unease, vision of a better state, and pathway to get there when it comes to communicating with a variety of different individuals. And it's important for us that when we're looking at the issues that we're passionate about, that we try to establish those three things. We try to establish that sense of unease on that human level for individuals. We try to establish that vision of a better state for those individuals so that we can show them that positive, hopeful vision. And then we want to be able to provide something simple that they can do so as to not overwhelm them in the process of everything. By doing this, I promise you can turn a lot of apathy into strong action. But here's the thing, the reason why we need people to get in the game, we need people to be involved, we need people to take action, is because we can't do all of this alone. We like to think that we can do everything. I like to think I can just do every single thing and I don't need anyone else in society, or I don't need help from other people. But the reality is especially in something like politics, we need a team. We have a lot of motivated people in this room, and I want to take the next 20 minutes or so to be able to help us build those connections, to build those teams that we need to be able to have to be effective. It's something that every major company, every major corporation understands. It's not just something political related, but also life related. You think about Apple, that was the example that Simon Sinek brought up just a little bit ago in the Golden Circle example. And when you think about Apple, a lot of people like to think about Steve Jobs. He was the visionary behind the company, but he had a team behind him. He had a large-scale group of individuals. His company today has more departments and more areas than I can count because the reality is that they can't do it by themselves. The greatest entrepreneurs, they need a strong team. And they need to be able to branch effectively, which is why as you're building your team, as you're building your movement, as you're trying to get people from being apathetic to taking action, we need to be able to think through the different ways that we can get others involved in the things that we're doing. Because it's not just about getting that motivation, it's about retaining that motivation with it. And oftentimes people want to feel needed. They want to feel like they're included in the things that they're doing and that they're making a true difference in the actions that they're taking. So when we think about it from a political perspective, there's a ton of different ways that you can branch out and find those teammates of yours. You have you in the center. Think of you in the center of everything that's going on. And as you're building out different things, think about the different roles that could play a very effective aspect towards what you're trying to accomplish. Oftentimes you have different things that you need to accomplish, and that includes stuff like media relations. Sometimes you need some people who are really strong at researching, finding that information, finding the stories and the facts that you need to communicate. Social media, door-to-door canvassing, fundraising, recruitment, phone banking, all of these different things, even lobbying under the dome, either at the federal or the state level or even local city councils. There's a ton of moving parts in the things that we want to be able to accomplish as individuals, and it's so important for us to figure out who those people are that we can then bring in and utilize their comparative advantage with. Because the reality is with all of us here, at least I think, there are certain things that we're good at, and there's certain things that other people are way better than us at. And it's important to identify those different things. So what I want to be able to do just for the next few minutes here is I want to give you all a chance to try and get to know each other, figure out where those comparative advantages are, because we have a lot of motivated individuals with a lot of common goals in the things that we want to accomplish. We all share some of these senses of unease, these visions of a better state, and these pathways to get there. So out of curiosity, of the people in the room here, how many of you are from Harrisburg? Raise your hand if you're from Harrisburg. Okay, so we got a few people. How many of you came in from Philadelphia? Okay, we got a lot of people from Philadelphia. As I'm doing this, I encourage you all to look around the room because these are the people that you will probably want to get to know throughout the course of this conference so that you can connect, that you can figure out ways to take action together and turn that apathy of other people into action. How many people here came from Pittsburgh? Anyone? Okay, we got some Pittsburgh, we got Philadelphia, we got Harrisburg. Anyone from Western Pennsylvania or other parts besides Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, or Harrisburg? Okay, very nice. Anyone from out of state? Anyone here from out of Pennsylvania? Okay, excellent. So we have a wide range in this room. We have a good mix of Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Western PA, and people from out of state. What about the remaining roles right here that we have that we're talking about? How many of you in this room, raise your hand if you think that you have a comparative advantage with social media? Any social media experts here? Okay, we have a few people given this gesture here. We have a table outside with Americans for Prosperity. We have a lot of people who are extremely knowledgeable when it comes to social media, so if you do need someone to help you out with that, that's one reason to come approach us and talk with us. What about researching? How many researchers do we got here? How many people feel like they're good at research? Okay, so we have a few hands. We have a few hands here. What about organizing? How many people feel like they can recruit people effectively? Yeah. So we got some people, we got some hands there. Fundraising, do we have any fundraising gurus here? Anyone who knows how to bring in money? Okay. Yeah, we got a few just around here. Event planners, how many event planners do we got here? Okay, excellent. So we have a ton of different things that we all need to utilize as we're trying to advance things, whether it's messaging, event planning, phone banking, fundraising. How many people feel like they're effective lobbyists? How many people do lobbying on a regular basis? Okay, excellent. You think about some of the other roles as well, writing being another one. How many writers do we got here? Excellent. So we got a mix of different experiences, we got a mix of different knowledge, we got a mix of people in this room that can bring different things to the table. So you'll see on the tables here that there are some handouts related to that. What I challenge you all to do is as you're conversing, as you're working with individuals, figure out where everyone's comparative advantage is and figure out how when you leave this room you can find ways to take action on these various different fronts. Because by doing so, it makes a huge difference. When you work in those teams and in conjunction, it's far more effective. The majority of governorship campaigns, U.S. Congress campaigns, U.S. Senate campaigns, they have a ton of moving parts, and they try to get the right people in the right places. Ronald Reagan was also a huge believer in this model. He believed at his core that he was not the smartest person in a wide variety of different subject matters. But his goal as president was to try and find the people who were most knowledgeable about each of those different fronts so that they could help him in becoming a strong leader. That's what we all need to be able to do as individuals, is find those strong, motivational, inspirational leaders within our lives that can help us propel things forward, help us move towards those goals, help us accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. So to wrap things up in a nice, neat bow in regards to apathy to action. As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people out there that don't really care. When we're engaging with people, there are effectively 4 different demographics that we're engaging with. We have our true believers. These are the people that, no matter what, they're on our side. They agree with pretty much everything we have to say. They're ready to go. They're motivated. And they're people who will want to take action across the board. You have your persuadables. You have the people where they can swing to the left, they can swing to the right. You can persuade them on certain things. If you give them the right information, you build the right relationships at the right time, it can make a huge difference. And then you have your hostiles. There are certain people in this world where it really doesn't matter what we say, they're not going to agree with us. And that's okay. And then you have, at your fourth, you have the apathetics, which is a demographic that a lot of people haven't really tapped into, haven't really understood. But when we utilize these methods, when we understand how we can get them involved, how we can be able to do things, it's extremely effective. Something that a lot of the best campaigns do, and it's similar to this branch management model, it's what's known as a escalation model. Essentially what they realize is that you can't just ask someone to do 50 things within your first encounter with them. Persuasion and motivation in general is a process. It takes time, it takes seeds that need to be planted, and it takes relationships that need to grow over time. So a lot of campaigns understand this dynamic. They understand that they meet with someone for the first time, and unless they're a true believer, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get engaged, get involved, and be acclimated with everything. So what you'll see a lot of times with political movements is they'll start out with something simple. Hey, we have this petition here. Would you be willing to sign that? And they sign the petition. And then as they keep meeting and getting to know this individual, they find additional tasks that they keep wanting you to do. Maybe the next time it's making phone calls. Hey, we're doing a big phone bank here on this day at this time. Was this something that you would be interested in doing? Then from there, if they keep being involved and engaged, that person wants to continue to feel needed, to feel involved, to feel included, wants to continue to be challenged. And oftentimes, a lot of people who then get involved with phone banks will then be tasked with being in charge of phone banks and organizing people for phone banks. And it just keeps going up the ladder from there. There's that escalation model that we see, and it's not just, it really isn't just with politics. It's an effective strategy we see in business. It's an effective strategy we see with churches when they're trying to bring people in. We understand that this is a process that's not going to happen overnight. But if we take it one step at a time and meet people where they're at, it makes the largest of differences. Something else I highly encourage you all to consider is striking a balance between these three elements right here. So you have essentially, when you're trying to organize and you're trying to get people involved, it's important to figure out three things. The first is what they're good at. Most of the time, people like to do what they're good at. Not always, but you got to figure out, are they a good communicator? Are they a good organizer? Are they a good event planner? Are they someone who can really bring in money? Do they have those types of connections? Think about something that someone is good at. But here's the thing, sometimes people don't like doing the things that they're good at. It's very fascinating. I'm sure some of you in this room have thought of something where, hey, I'm good at this, but I really hate doing it. I can certainly think of a ton of different examples. One of the most fascinating ones came from famous tennis player Andre Agassi, if anyone remembers him. He wrote a great bio a while back, and what he said in that book is he hated tennis. He made millions of dollars playing tennis as a professional, but he hated it. And it was funny because he was very good at it, obviously, but he didn't like doing it. And sometimes there's that discrepancy that we need to make. And so when we are working with individuals, if there's something they're good at, make sure they also like doing it, or it'll be a very fast way to turn that action back into apathy. And then the other thing, too, is make sure that it creates value. So you want to make sure you strike that balance of finding someone who's good at something, that they like doing it, and that it actually creates value. If someone's a really good underwater basket weaver, and you want to try and get a campaign going to get someone reelected, that's great. Maybe you can find a way to incorporate it. It's going to be awfully tough. So there's always that trifecta there. If you can find someone who's good at something, if you can find someone who likes doing something, but most importantly, you find someone who can create value, make sure that you have them feel involved, feel included. Make sure you don't overwhelm them with 50 different things that they need to do. It's that process that we talked about. It's that establishment of the sense of unease. It's that establishment of that vision of a better state. It's that establishment of that pathway to get there and the things that we're hoping to accomplish. The last thing I want to close out with before we move into the main section of everything that's going on is the number one piece of advice that I try to give with individuals. Because too often what I see with people trying to organize, trying to take action, trying to get involved, is they try to come up with the perfect plan at the perfect time. But the problem with coming up with the perfect plan at the perfect time is that the best laid plans often go awry. And then as a result of that, we keep getting in our heads. We keep thinking to ourselves, well, it's not perfect, so I have to go back to the drawing board. I'm not going to try this because it's not going to work. So I'm going to keep going back to the drawing board. I'm not going to try any of this. I'm not going to do anything until we know for sure that it is perfect. The problem is that when you don't take that action, you don't move the needle. You don't grow. You don't improve as an individual. One of the best examples is a family member of mine who I love to death, is a brilliant individual, but sometimes he gets into that trap of trying to come up with the perfect plan at the perfect time, in the perfect moment, and then neglects to take the action that's most important. Okay, the example I remember is one time he reached out to me and he said, hey, so I want to start getting healthier, I want to start going to the gym, I want to start living a better life in that regard. Do you have any advice? I'm not exactly Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but I gave him just a few tips and tricks that I had learned from a nutrition perspective, from a fitness perspective. I said, yeah, this is just some of the stuff I learned. Maybe you go to the gym one time and you try it out. And he goes, okay, sounds good. Well, I just looked at all your advice and I think it sucks. And I go, okay, well, that's fine. That's fine. But here's the thing. You're not actually going to know whether my advice is good or bad unless you actually go to the gym, unless you actually try out these different things. That's what you need to do. If you want to determine what's the best way of doing things and what's not the best way of doing things, you've got to actually do that. It's the same with political messaging. It's the same with organizing. When we're establishing a sense of unease or a vision of a better state or a pathway to get there, maybe it didn't resonate with someone, and that's okay. The reality is we're not going to be able to figure out and perfect that message unless we continue practicing, unless we continue growing, unless we continue working with those people, instead of just continually drafting it up and being afraid to share it with anyone. So he goes, okay, fine, I'll go to the gym, that makes sense. 3 days pass, I get another email, and he tells me, well, I've been doing about 8 hours of research on Reddit, and I found that this is better than this one here's good, but they said it's cookie cutter, they said this is bad, this is good, I don't know about this one, and it was just this long email. And I just go, okay, stop. You're not going to gain 20 pounds of muscle by reading Reddit 8 hours a day. If we could gain 20 pounds of muscle reading Reddit 8 hours a day, we'd all be Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So please, just pick something. Try it out. I promise at the very least you will learn something. Pick this thing, go to the gym, try it out. Maybe pick this one you thought was cookie cutter. Try it out, see if it works. Okay, sounds good. So then 3 days pass, get another email. It says, no subject. So I open up the email. I'm just very curious, what's going on here? I open up the email. All it says in the email, so what type of headphones do I wear when I go to the gym? What type of headphones? Well, there's music at the gym. That's not going to make or break the things that you do. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson isn't in the shape that he is because he wears Beats headphones. Beats headphones may want you to think that, but it's really not the case. So please, don't overthink it. Just try something out and figure out what works. To his credit, he ended up trying it out eventually. But the thing that I encourage you all to do is in the same way that my family member had a trouble getting out of that mold of trying to come up with the perfect thing at the perfect time, I encourage you all to continue putting yourself out there, to continue practicing those different things. Continue talking with those individuals you want to get motivated. Continue to try and communicate that sense of unease on that human level, that vision of a better state, that pathway to get there and the things that you want to be able to do. I encourage you all to think through this exact thing right here. What are people good at? What do they like doing? What do they create value? And if it turns out you put them in the wrong role, that's okay. It's a learning experience that you can then improve upon continually on a regular basis. The last thing as well to consider is when we're figuring out those roles. Sometimes we think we have it all figured out. Sometimes we think we have that perfect plan. But then it kind of goes off the rails a little bit. The reality with all of this is we're not going to be able to grow, we're not going to be able to improve, we're not going to be able to organize, we're not going to be able to turn apathy into action unless we continue that effort. And that's the way we improve, that's the way we get better at everything. There's that thing, 10,000 hours. There's that notion that if you practice something for 10,000 hours, it doesn't matter what it is, you can get at least kind of good at it. And it's the same with turning apathy into action, it's the same with political organizing, it's the same with communicating. It's a phenomenon that really encompasses life in so many different respects. So as you leave this room today, I challenge you all to find someone in your life who maybe you haven't talked to in a little while. Maybe someone at this conference who you want to get to know a little bit better. I want you to talk about some of the issues that you're passionate about. Maybe establish a sense of unease that you have related to that issue. Talk about maybe some of the ways that you want to make that issue better. And if you're part of an organization trying to get someone to take action, give them something that they can do to advance your cause, to advance your purpose, to advance your passion, and to advance your issue. Find that individual, one of those individuals, and practice that. And maybe throughout time, as you get to know more individuals at this conference, as you get to know more individuals in your community, you will find those people who are good at those things like event organizing or recruiting or fundraising or those various other aspects. Maybe you'll find the right individuals in the right places that can help you build that team that moves that needle forward. That's what I encourage you all to do, because at the end of the day, we need as many people as possible to take action on the things that we are passionate about, and there's those powers in numbers. And we know that in this room. And that's what I encourage you all to do as you leave this room. That's what our organization is passionate about as well, is being that force multiplier that allows for people to take action on the issues that are affecting the country the most. So as I mentioned, I'm Mike Sylvester with Americans for Prosperity. If you want to learn more about how you can get involved, how you can turn action, how you can get people from being apathetic to turning into action, we have QR codes on the table. Highly recommend scanning those. We got a booth outside in the back. Feel free to connect with many of our staff who have a wide range of experiences in the realm of politics, in the realm of turning apathy into action. And most importantly, I want to thank you all for your time today, and I encourage you all to continue being motivated, continue trying out new things, and continue to work towards making this country the greatest nation that it can possibly be, the greatest nation that welcomed me here on October 25th, 2018. Thank you very much. I'll be sticking around throughout the conference if you have any questions or comments or concerns.